So we want to help guide that and give more information about what sex therapy really is and what sex therapy isn't. And hopefully that'll help people make their decisions of what they want.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy.
Welcome. Hello.
Hey, Keely.
Hi, Melissa. So we have some updates. And today is an episode with you and I. We were just saying how this is in between two interviews. And so just our voices today. And we're talking about, I think the title or how we talk about this is, what does a sex therapist sound like? Or what kind of questions do we ask? What is sex therapy really about? We've talked about sex a lot this year and in other episodes, but we haven't always fully laid down the groundwork. And it's like if someone's coming to sex therapy for the first time, or really how I see it more is if someone is, oh, I've heard about sex therapy. What is sex therapy? What do you talk about?
Yeah. Or how do I prepare for sex therapy? For some folks, going into therapy with some idea of what you want to work on, it can be very helpful for you and the therapist. So hopefully today's episode gives you some more points that you can reflect on and ideas if you are interested in working with a sex therapist.
And just what is sex therapy? Yeah.
What is sex, really?
Before we get to that, let's have some updates. If you have updates, we'll introduce
Updates
ourselves.
and intros. Yes, all the good things. We'll start with intros. I'm Melissa DeSegura. I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist and professional counselor. I'm a white person. I'm bisexual. I am able bodied. I am polyamorous and I'm gender fluid. I use she and they pronouns.
My name is Keely C. Helmick. I'm the owner of Connective Therapy Collective. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm also a certified sex therapist. I am white, non binary, queer, mainly able bodied at this moment. And I don't even, relationships, what is that even? What is even the title? I don't freaking know at this point. I just saw on TikTok, there's this person that goes by the name Therapy Jeff, and he's a local person in Portland, Oregon. And he posed the question of, are you avoiding dating right now because you aren't ready to date? Or is it because you don't want to deal with the dumpster fire that current dating is?
Valid question.
I know. And you know what, Melissa? Like, I honestly got off the apps this weekend. I was like, I'm going to take a full break.
Yeah.
And for me, the break is I noticed that I was just casually on the apps, and the profiles that I'd made, I'd kind of updated them, but like the pictures, the profiles, like what I was presenting as myself on these apps really was reflective of when I created them like a year ago.
Sure.
And I wanted to take some time to really think about what it is that I want right now. I am still dating the one person who's non-monogamous, and I just am like, just gonna see what happens.
Yeah. It sounds like you're being very present and intentional with your profiles on apps, for example.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to reflect on stepping back from it for a moment and being like, what was I getting out of it? What do I wanna get out of it? I think it's a really good reflection too, just on technology in general, because we get so much out of technology, but I think it also hinders us. And it's
Mm.
interesting in therapy right now because there's this transition of going from, a lot of people are doing mainly telehealth therapy and then going to more of a hybrid or going back into person. And we keep talking about this coming back into person or reconnecting or connecting with people. in all aspects, work and romantic relationships and friendships and family, and using technology in a very specific, intentional way.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that means for dating. I don't know. I'm like, maybe I can meet some people in real life, or maybe it's just a true break. And whatever that means is just what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just letting it be.
Yeah. And I just was, I mean, just really just, I like to think about when I want to do things, waiting to do something till I really want to do it. And I
Hmm.
wasn't
Hmm.
fully invested in the dating apps at this moment. And so why half-heartedly do something?
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of like what we've talked about with consent. Like you want that absolute hell yes, I'm ready from yourself before you engage.
Yeah, there was an article actually, and I can't I'm referencing it. I can't, it was years ago. This person talked about dating and love and connection. And he was just like, it's either a fuck yes or no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that concept of like, okay, you're either really into it or just let's not do it. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my update. It's not a really interesting or fun update. It's just
It's
an update.
real. That's what's happening. It's if it's any consolation, it's very interesting to me because I'm like, oh wow, that affirms like most of my experience being non-committal about dating apps and being like, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here if I don't want to be here.
Yeah, if you don't want to, yeah, and I think that honestly, I think part of the challenge and why dating is so hard right now is because I think I'm curious how many people are on dating apps right now, just kind of just being there
Yeah. Yeah.
and not really maybe in the same space that I am, and but wanting to keep that openness of potential.
Hmm. Now, as you're saying that, I'm like, this is also, I've said this before, and this is definitely, I'm like, it's not like a great marketing thing to share, but like, it also represents my profile on Instagram. If any of you follow me, sorry, not sorry. I'm very non-committal about marketing. Just honestly, more work. I'm really non-committal about giving myself more work. And social media, I just do have such boundaries around and it drains my energy and it just doesn't feel good. And I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be there. I don't know. We'll decide.
Yeah, well, and I think honestly, I think how this connects with sex is when there's a blasé attitude or not knowing what you really want out of sex or a sexual connection with somebody. And I want to get your update, Melissa, but I think that can feed into what we're talking about with like sex therapy and utilizing sex therapy in the way that you want to and getting what you want out of it. Because when I think about people coming in for sex therapy, sometimes it's underutilized because people come into sex therapy being like, okay, I want to have sex. It's like just someone going into a dating app and being like, I want to date somebody. But when you go into sex therapy, it's really helpful to have intention around that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we want to help guide that and give more information about what sex therapy really is and what sex therapy isn't. And hopefully that'll help people make their decisions of what they want or have some time to do some reflection, some guided reflection before diving in with a therapist specifically in sex therapy.
Yeah. 100%. Well, what is my update? I think I I think I arrived this morning being like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. This is my time to reflect, evidently. Recording live for everyone to listen to. I'm well. I'm well. I guess it's still winter, so kind of slowly crawling out of winter-ish. I'm noticing I have a little bit more energy. There's more light. I have noticed since moving up to the Pacific Northwest how much I am impacted by the seasons. So I really feel it in such a different way than I ever did growing up in California, where it was pretty much the same all the time. I am happily in relationship. Things are just going really well and I'm trying to continue to be present, which is difficult for me as relationships progress. I'm very much like I was the little kid who was dreaming about my whole future adulthood when I was like, 7. So Being present is always a process for me. It's my continuous work. But yeah, I'm doing well. I One thing that was really fun that happened, fun. It wasn't fun, but it was really meaningful was my partner who doesn't live here sent me some flowers. And it was such a
Oh,
s yeah, it was such a surprise, and again, like, especially because we don't share space, and I really don't know when that will happen again for various reasons. It was really meaningful, and it's cool how people can find a way to be present even from long distances away.
yeah.
So that made me feel very special. Yeah, so things are good. I'll share more. My career joy is related to something I did with my local partner, so I'll share that later, but I'm good. I'm working ugh, God, I'm not gonna judge myself, but I'm, like, still doing the relationship with self, y'all. Like, I'm still working on it, and specifically habits. It's I think for a lot of people, it's so difficult to maintain habits that I don't even wanna call them healthy habits because we can kinda get into a judgment place about what's healthy and what's
Yeah.
not, but just
Yeah.
what feels good to me and what I operate best with, and that, like, includes things like learning how to cook for myself, things like budgeting, like, these things that feel like, I don't know, like the normal adult stuff that none of us really wanna do, but that's part of my self-care right now. I'm not doing the bubble baths and the face mask and even the solo dates right now. The self-care is, like, really nailing down some practices that are helping me in my life.
There's a certain part of when we're talking about sex where there's a piece that is framing those habits and framing consistency about it being in the forefront. I think it's so easy. I mean, one of the things I think a very common thing that people come into sex therapy is saying, sometimes with a partner, I think most times with a partner, some people come and they come individually, but usually still have a partner or partners. And they're like, well, they come with the basic framework of, I want to have more sex, or they say, I want to have more sex.
Right. I was like or they say my partner would like me to want to have more sex.
Yes. And so, what can be really helpful before starting sex therapy is to, as you're talking about recognizing within yourself your relationship with yourself, it's starting with what is your relationship with yourself around sex?
Yeah. Yeah, like what and I think some of these questions, like you referenced, Keely, we have said before, but really sitting down and thinking about when you hear the word sex today, right now, what comes up in your mind? What stories come up? What emotions come up? What happens in your body? But that's the first part of just reflecting, like, what is even going on? What's your relationship to sex right now? One way to simplify it is think about what are 3 words you would use to describe the sex you are having right now or not having, right? What 3 words would you use to describe your sex life or your relationship to sex?
Yeah.
Then what 3 words would you like to believe in the future? Is that something you want to change?
Well, and something so if we're working with someone individually, I think it's helpful when we talk, think about previously, and sometimes is with the partner you're not with. And so it can be helpful to think about this before going into therapy is like, what sex in your past was really enjoyable?
Yeah.
And are there pieces to that, or are there things when you think about that that you could incorporate currently? Or
Mhm.
what changed that and why is that different?
Totally.
But
Yeah, and that's one thing I think a lot of people are familiar with in therapy is that the therapist may ask questions about your past. And that is true of sex therapy too. We're going to ask about your relationship with sex, how it was first introduced to you. How did you even learn about it? What were you taught about it when you were super young?
well, I think clarifying even like what a sex therapist is, and I think everyone would have different definitions of what a sex therapist is. And
Yeah.
honestly, what I tell people is a lot of sex therapy is actually trauma work.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the difference between a general licensed practitioner, a general licensed therapist or licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical social workers, the difference is they work often with trauma as well, but don't even mention the word sex. Like, how many times we talk about therapists in general not even mentioning sex.
Right. Yeah.
And so, as a certified sex therapist with the extra training and just with the mindset of we still look at people holistically, but we include the sexual part of a person.
Yeah.
And so much therapy leaves that out. And so I think sometimes people are cautionary or aren't sure if they want to see a sex therapist because they think that we're going to do is talk about sex, or they confuse sex therapy with sex coaching, or sometimes even confuse it with sex surrogacy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And when I use the word trauma or like looking at your past and seeing what influences the sex that you're having right now or the sex that you're not having and what is going on with that. And we talk so much when we're talking about like general couples counseling, where we look at the past, we look at attachment, we talked about attachment, we look at relationship or how we were raised and how those things influence how we attach or connect with romantic partners currently. And
Mhm.
again, that framework is great, but the sexual part is often left out. And
Right.
how did we as a person grow into our sexual selves? What happened or what influenced us? And and how do we move through and evolve through that? And making those things conscious, we then have more control of how we want our future sex lives to look like, how we want our relationship with our sexual selves.
I like what you said about the holistic piece too, that it's just sex is a part of human existence that we bring to the table explicitly so because unless people have had experience in sex therapy before, the client usually isn't going to just bring it up. It's usually the therapist that needs to make sure that that's in the room. And there may be, I mean, this is where you do want to, if you can do a consultation with the provider before you start working with them, you can ask these things, ask about how they approach sex therapy, because there may be some providers who are really specifically focused on the mechanics of sex and techniques and maybe even go more in a coaching direction with it. Whereas you're saying, Keely, I think from the therapy perspective, it is more of this holistic, full picture of a human being with all the trauma and all the grief and all the other emotional processes we know how to navigate, but with sex intentionally at the table because we know it's integral. It's connected to all of it, whether
Yeah.
or not the therapist talks about it.
Well, and what's going on in other parts of our lives really influence the sex that we're having.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when I think about and if anyone's listening who's a sex coach, you can clarify because, just like a therapist, different sex coaches will have different ways that they work with clients.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, those sex coaches will refer folks to therapy before doing sex coaching because sex coaching often focuses more not just like on technique, but really focuses on the present. And they do focus more on specific sex.
Sure. I like
And
that that point though, that it's focused on the present.
and goal, you think about coaching and it's like goals and really creating movement. And so I often tell people, or when I'm working with couples or individuals, I will at some point sometimes refer them to a sex coach because when things have been worked through in counseling, sometimes a sex coach is going to be the right fit then at that time.
Sure. Yeah, and that may look like healing trauma, as we've indicated in counseling. That may look like, if you're in a couple, working on communication skills and learning how to regulate your nervous systems when you're triggered. If there are, triggers around talking about sex, for example, those are things that can be ironed out in therapy that can then be useful to better engage in coaching.
And there's just so much that goes into it. And so, as we were saying before, if you're thinking about sex therapy or thinking about wanting to explore more about what's going on in your life and how that connects to your sex life, how can people you can answer this. We'll both answer this, but I'm posing the question of what can someone do before they engage in sex therapy? Or if they're like, okay, I'm not sure if sometimes I use the word, I don't really quote unquote need sex therapy, but what can I do with myself in preparation? Or what are the things, you mentioned the 3 questions. I think about also, oh, I just want to mention sidetrack. I was going to say it before is that the other thing about sex therapy is not, especially like at a place like CTC, we also, when we're talking about sex therapy, really reflect on how does gender and sexuality interplay with sex. And so there are a lot of things, especially if you're in an exploration around gender, or, we talk about people newly coming out as queer or just exploring their sexuality, exploring their gender expression, how gender plays into sex.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
have a specific episode on gender, so we're not going to go full depth into the gender piece, but just that's again where sex therapy can really differentiate from general counseling, because a general counselor may be talking about like, oh, how do you come out? How do you talk to people about, how do you come into your body with your new identity, and talking a lot about identity. But
Yeah.
then we're here to be like, okay, so how can we talk about sex in a new way that, you weren't taught or that
Right.
you haven't been experiencing in the past? And so that question, for when we say, "Oh, well, what kind of sex have you had that you really enjoyed?" And maybe that can influence, well, maybe it's that, "Oh, I'm exploring my new identities, integrating these pieces that I'm exploring. How does that reflect and integrate with my sex life now?"
Yeah. I think just posing these questions, thinking about these things before sex therapy is part of how you get prepared. I mean, I feel like journaling is my answer to everything. Newsflash, that's how I process. I respect not everyone does. But I think reflecting on some of those things, and perhaps it's even coming up with a list of questions for yourself that you haven't asked or don't know how to explore on your own. One of them, to your point about identities, Keely, I'll offer these. It's like a multi-part question here, but this comes from a really good resource, the Conscious Sexual Self Workbook by Melissa Fritchley, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist in the San Francisco Bay Area and was my teacher in grad school for that one class we got in sex therapy. It was only one class, which is such a shame, but I will say she's fantastic. So in her workbook, and the workbook's great because if you do like journaling, there's a shit ton of journal prompts and there are exploration things. So we've talked about using masturbation, for example, as a way to practice and explore your sexuality and the concept of pleasure. And there's lots of exercises in here for those of you who want homework. But speaking to the identity piece, Keely, that you were talking about with gender, with sexual orientation, with ability, with, racial identity, all these different pieces. One of the questions she asks is, based on any of your identities, embraced by you or assigned by others, what sexual stereotypes do you feel people apply to you? Write them down. How do you feel about them? How do you consciously or unconsciously act these out or confirm people's beliefs about you? Or how do you actively negate them? How do these stereotypes affect your behavior? As I say that, I think about the compulsive heterosexuality thing we've talked about.
Yeah, compulsory. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and there's so many other examples, but as queer people, as gender diverse people, there are a lot of images we get and a lot of stereotypes, a lot of language, a lot of programming around what we should or shouldn't be, what we should look like, what we shouldn't look like, who has access to sex, who doesn't. So thinking about that, how are your identities influencing how you think about how you're allowed to experience sex or how you're allowed to experience pleasure? And are there any of those allowances you're wanting to change in sex therapy?
Hey, it's Cardinal, your behind the scenes buddy. Whoops, I made a mistake. I said the wrong phone number in the last episode. So if you want to call and leave a message about your queer joy, the number is 503 660 4409. We're wanting to make an extra special community compilation for episode 69. So call us and let us know what's been setting your heart aflutter. It doesn't have to be relationship related, it can be any joy. Again, the number is 503 660 4409, and you can find it in the episode description. All right, back to the show.
Gosh, and I think this idea of how others interpret identity of self,
Yeah.
I really see this playing out in long-term couples a lot. And mainly it's monogamous couples where one person is coming into their gender identity and how they're working with their partner to have sex that reflects who they are, not
Mhm.
who they used to be or who they used to present as, or and changing that sex and the way that queering sex isn't about necessarily changing your partner. You can change your partner or you can have more than one partner, but it's how do you speak to the partner and how do you incorporate different ways of having sex? And when you have a cis person and a non-binary or trans person who's just coming into their identity in this dynamic, those set ways of how sex is supposed to be really comes to the forefront.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of where sex therapy is can be so helpful, and especially couples therapy done with a sex therapist, because these are things that we are better trained in. Not that we're like perfect at it, but we're better trained in and have more conversations and working with others to move through that.
Yeah.
And, I don't wanna say it's a joke, but, often therapists, especially that are non-monogamous, will be like, "Well, just open up your marriage or open up your relationship," and that can be helpful. But there are ways that humans together can explore new ways of interacting with each other's bodies in affirming ways.
Right. Yeah. I'm so happy you brought up this concept of change because, yeah, like that's why people usually go to therapy. They want something to be different. They're looking for change.
Yeah.
And that said, it does feel like an opportunity to almost like point out sort of the nature, at least where you and I stand as clinicians, Keely. I can't speak for every sex therapist, but almost like the nature of how we approach change or investigate it, because I think we come from a very curious, non-judgmental place. And there are some of you and or people out there who come to sex therapy wanting a change that we actually have to do some work around, like what the request is. For example, someone coming in and saying, I have this thing that I do that like it's the only thing that turns me on and it makes me orgasm or it gives me pleasure, but I don't want it. I don't like it. Get rid of it. And that is something that I've heard people come to sex therapy for, but that's not how it works. It's like people might know the word shadow work if any of you are in spiritual communities. It's sort of like that parts work, right? Those of you who are on the IFS train right now, we can't just we don't get rid of parts, right? There's integration, there's healings, there's work that needs to happen. But at least, like I said, I don't come from a shame-based stance. So that's something that I think sex therapists will help you explore your expectations in sex therapy. Good sex therapist, good any therapist will help you explore your expectations and figure out what are the changes we can collaborate around. Because maybe we can't change that one particular behavior, but we can change how you look at it, how you feel about it, how you navigate the impulses, right? And there's so many different examples. I'm being vague, I understand, but I have seen that where people come in really with a lot of shame and they're saying, get rid of this part for me. And that's really just not what we do.
Yeah. And it can be some of this work can be seem like it takes a long time, and sometimes people don't always get the results they want, or you can come into therapy thinking you're going to be working on one thing and then whoops, it went this way.
Yeah.
And that's part of the growth process. But again, as a sex therapist, we're helping people navigate these pieces, not just when they're having sex, but how does that incorporate into their whole life? And how does what they're doing in their life influence and change what they're doing sexually?
Yeah.
And as usual, it comes back. I mean, we're talking like, oh, it starts with self. I was like, if there's like a theme throughout, it starts with self and communication. Honestly, I hear many times couples coming in and saying they feel so close to their partner, but they don't know how to talk about sex.
Absolutely. That's a big one. And I know we've said this here on the podcast before, but I say this to so many clients. If being in sex therapy is your first opportunity to talk regularly, great. That's one place to practice and immerse yourself in more conversation outside of sex therapy. And that's something anyone can do, even if you don't have access right now to a sex therapist. Listen to podcasts like this one. Listen to all the podcasts, right? Watch YouTube, watch people, find people, and make sure your social media feeds, you're getting really good information and regular information about sex. That's part of how we make the conversation more comfortable. We just practice having it.
Yeah. And sometimes sex therapy for an individual is just a place to learn to be more comfortable about talking about sex.
Mhm.
Because, you mentioned earlier the shame. And so, depending on your group of friends, depending on who you surround yourself with, maybe you're not comfortable talking about sex in general. And so, the relationship with a therapist can be an opportunity to just practice that
Yeah.
and
Yep.
explore. And what is it like to say certain words or talk about certain things and say it out loud? And you can practice that with the therapist before talking to partners.
Totally. Yeah. And sex therapy is not just for allosexual people, it's for asexual people too. And I have plenty of asexual clients who get a lot out of the space to talk about how sex has impacted them because we live in such a like allosexual centric world. I can I even say that though? Is that even true? I don't even know. There's so many things about sex. It's so shamed. Everyone's so obsessed with it though, right? Whether they're like affirmative or they're shamed and I feel like my asexual people are like, fucking stop already. I'm over it. Can we talk about something else? And sometimes sex therapy is a place for them to talk about those things,
Yeah.
right? Explore and affirm their asexuality.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that is a perfect example of someone who's on the asexual spectrum, who's asexual. Talk about expectations from society, expectations from partners, expectations from anyone. And that conversation or those conversations may be just about how do I how does a person boundary or talk to people being very specific? I don't really want to talk about sex,
Yeah.
or I
Yeah.
want to talk about all these other things, or explore being on the spectrum of like, okay, sometimes I have these certain ideas and desires, but in general, I don't feel like that.
Or I feel very sexual in my own body and I'm very connected to my own. Yes, I love my sexuality and I don't want to have partnered sex.
Yeah.
And I have a difficulty of the world assuming I must want to, right? That's something that comes up for clients.
Or yeah. And some people come in and want a romantic connection with people and want partnership, but don't want to have that sex involved, and how to practice talking with and using the words. And what does that look like? And affirming that just because that's the expectation doesn't mean that's what you have to do in your relationships. And you can find connection in ways. So we're talking about sex, but then not talking about sex, but it's still
It
about
impacts us
sex.
all because it's part of our experience, regardless if we're allosexual or asexual, it is part of the human experience. And so we are all impacted.
Well, and it's interesting, and this will be another. Well, we kind of talked about in one episode about the idea of like queer platonic relationships, and I was thinking about how when we talk about sex, some people also might shy away from sex therapy because they think maybe that we're going to place too much importance on sex.
Mhm.
Interesting, like the exploration. And I think Shrimp Teeth does this a lot on their Instagrams posts. But the idea of like how we, in the one hand, we shy away as a culture or like don't want to talk about sex. So we talk about sex so much and really elevate the importance of sex. But not just that, but the importance of sex in relationships, and that if you're having sex with somebody, then that relationship is quote unquote more important
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
intertwine sexual relationship with romantic. And as a person, or as we all are exploring these dynamics of our sexual self and our sexual connections, also recognizing within that the you can separating intimacy from sex always, and thinking about our connections that we have with others that doesn't involve sex or doesn't always involve sex. And that can also be a piece of sex therapy.
Right. Yeah. Dismantling the hierarchy.
Yeah, and it may sound counterintuitive. Well, and I think also because all of our therapists work from a non-monogamous viewpoint, even if there are people that identify as monogamous, but still have the training and understanding of non-monogamy. And so looking at how we sometimes place the importance and how can we shift that? How do we shift our views of ourselves and our connections that don't involve sex?
Yeah, especially because we talk about fluidity so much, right? In one relationship, even a monogamous one, there are likely to be different phases of the relationship and some that may be very focused on sex and some may not be. And it's all good. It's all okay.
Yeah, and I realize as we're saying this, like, I wonder if anyone's gonna leave listening to this episode and be like, "Well, I'm confused then. Do sex therapists talk about sex? What do they talk
Do
about?"
they? Do they not?
And I think at the end, really, therapy is coming into it with the openness of exploration. The therapist should be trained in non-judgment, and y'all get to decide for yourself what role that plays, but that we wanna shift and examine some of these cultural norms and expectations so that you as an individual and you and a couple and you with your partners can create the sex life, the romantic relationship, the platonic relationship that you want outside of expectations, and feel that pleasure. And also, I think like when we talk about pleasure is also that the only pleasure isn't just focused on sex.
Right.
And so, I guess wrapping up is coming back to the term of holistic, and that if someone is seeking sex therapy or curious about sex therapy, that we're going to be there as therapists, listening and seeing you as a full person.
Yeah. And I think that's a valuable thing to ask about. As I said before in that consultation, when you get on the phone, if you do have an idea of, hey, this is vaguely or generally what I would like to work on. I noticed that you wrote you're a sex therapist or that you're sex permanent. Like, tell me more about that. What is your approach to sex therapy? That is a really valid question to ask any new therapist.
Yeah. Well, we will continue talking about sex, but for this episode, it's about that time to shift into pleasure and queer joy.
It's joy time.
And I feel like, Melissa, you are super ready to share your queer joy.
I have queer joy. I have one in the wings that I'm waiting to share, but I'm going to wait at least one more week on that one. It's like a timely thing.
Yeah.
But I went dancing over the last weekend.
Oh,
And
fun.
I don't do this often. So it was so much fun. And it just was really great. I went with my partner and it was a themed night. And so my partner may have made some really cool props for us, literally made props for us. Like, it's just a partner who can make props for like going out. This is great. This is right up my alley. So it's just really fun and nice to be out. I have not been doing as much in the solo date realm or even the partner date realm recently, just winter again. It's cold. But yeah, it was really fun. I had a great time. It was like all 90s music. So my middle schooler, inner middle schooler was like very happy. I was having a great time.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, yeah, and I was grateful too that I was not in too much physical pain over the rest of the weekend. Only the one knee that I had surgery on it a long time ago, so it's been a problem ever since. So that was my only ache afterwards, which was also part of the career joy is like, wow, I could do that now. Great.
And
Awesome.
you can move your body. Talk
I
about
can move my body.
pleasure and connecting with your body.
Yes, yeah. And the whole
Yeah.
like co-regulation of dancing in a group of people, like it's magic. It's magic.
So great. I mean, my queer joy, I mean, I just am still on a high from last night. So I went to a Blazer game, and going to a Blazer game isn't queer in of itself. The queer part of it is that I went with an ex. So my connection with all the humans that are in my world, and especially an ex, I don't know. It was just so much joy. I was nerding out because Damian Lillard like broke all these like records last night, and to be a part of it. And there's just something about sports. I know there's like a lot of people that aren't sports people, so I understand that. And I reconnected with sports. I reconnected with basketball. That was a really big part of when I was growing up. And it's interesting. I don't even know if I want to be this vulnerable, but I'll just say that there's a person that I was very connected to with basketball in my youth who was not a good person. And so I was reflecting actually last night, talking about sex therapy. I was reflecting last night how wonderful it was that as an adult, reconnecting with my love of the sport, I think that it was just great to have that. It was a really healing moment. And in all the joy and listening and reconnecting to pleasure, and just like you were talking about co-regulation and being in this huge, being in the huge Moda Center with all these people, and
Yeah.
everyone just like, the coolest thing was like seeing how the team, like Damian Lillard, so everyone knew like when he was about to break the record. So then at that point, his team members kept getting him the ball so he could score more points. So he could like break this record and then
I
go
love it.
on the record. And that flow, and that can translate anywhere. It's just so easy to see in sports, the term of being in flow, being present, and being in this huge crowd of people. And being in the huge crowd of people, very different, all different backgrounds, all different humans just happen to be in Portland, Oregon, watching this game, and all united in cheering for this person. It was just so fun. I could go on and on. I need to stop.
There's such energy to a big crowd like that, like cheering. That's incredible.
Well, and because this episode will be released not long after the game, so it feels like I can actually share it and it's more relevant. Anyway, on that note, feeling good from this weekend. We both had great events that we went out and out in the world.
Look at us
Out in the
go.
world, yeah. So coming up, I do want to plug that we have, for those that are in Portland, I'm really excited. We now have on Eventbrite, Lucy Fielding. She will be doing a workshop for the public at Lewis and Clark College. And so that's happening April 22nd on Saturday. Check out our website. You can get a link to Eventbrite. Check it out. See if it's something you're interested in. It's for the public. It is definitely for therapists, but it's also for anybody who wants to learn more about trans sex, maybe read the book and is really curious. And she's just a brilliant speaker. So that's what's coming up for us. Otherwise, you know how to find us on Instagram, on Facebook, our website. And I hope you all have a queer and joyful week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective, hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSegrand, with audio edited by me and Leigh Supapo Bernito. I'm your producer, Cardinal Marking. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify, or send us an email at media@connectivetherapycollective.com. For more Queer Joy, visit our Instagram at Queer Relationships Queer Joy, or our website, www.connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.